Um, I wanted to just share, I'm Dana Bentley. I'm a representative of the early childhood program at Lesley University, and I'm also a pre-K teacher. And when we came together thinking about this session and about sort of what is needed right now, what does innovations, how can we serve the early childhood community? I think that as a classroom teacher, so many of us are looking right now to say, how are we meeting the needs of our kids right now? And particularly, how are we meeting the needs of diverse learners in this incredibly complicated time? And both as a teacher and as the mom of a child on an IEP, what does it look like to provide services via Zoom? What does it look like to support learners in in-person classroom environments with the limitations and the expectations that we are all trying to meet in a really, really stressful and immediate time where suddenly our practice looked one way and then 1 week later it looked completely different. And so in response to that need and how that need just keeps emerging and shifting and changing, we brought together this group of incredible educators who are looking at multiple lenses on what it means to serve the diverse, incredible learners that we all have the opportunity to work with. As we're just thinking about the evening, the way we're going to pace the evening, we have three groups of panelists who will be sharing with us. The presenters are going to share about 25 minutes. We'll have 5 minutes for questions for those specific panelists. And then at the end, we'll open it up to sort of larger questions and conversations. And we're really hoping that people will bring their thoughts, their experiences to really make this a rich conversation, because I already know a lot of you on this call or on this Zoom are experiencing a lot of this in your own practices as well. A few norms for the evening. We're just going to ask people to be on mute. While the presenters are presenting. We will collect questions in the chat. So if you have questions, just pose those in the chat, and at the end of each presenter's presentation, we will make sure that those questions get posed. We also just wanted to make sure that people were aware that that the educators sharing tonight are sharing experiences with the children that they work with, the classrooms, and the one-on-one relationships that they work with. So we ask that you just be very respectful of those children and those experiences, to kind of keep that private and to be thoughtful about how we're addressing that, because these are the experiences and educational experiences with these children. We are lucky enough to have an incredible panel of speakers this evening, all of whom are presenting different lenses on supporting diverse learners during a very challenging time. The different spaces that we're looking at, we're first looking at one-on-one therapies, working with children via Zoom as well as in person. Then we will shift to looking more at environments and how those environments are constructed to meet the needs of diverse learners. And then closing off, looking a little more at families and family advocacies and how can we best support children and families during this time. So I wanted to just share a little bit about the presenters and their incredible work before we start with their presentations. We'll begin our evening with Dr. Ann Densmore, and forgive me, I'm going to have to read off of this because I want to make sure I get this right. Dr. Densmore is a play-based therapist, photographer, and a certified speech pathologist and audiologist with a doctorate in education from Clark University and a master's in human development and psychology from Harvard University Graduate School of Education. She has worked with children with language delay and social skills for over 35 years in a wide range of settings. Dr. Densmore focuses on play and shared experiences as bridges of connection and empowerment, framing each child as capable communicators and collaborators. She explains, "I help children speak from their hearts in the moment, connecting with me and with their families through mutual experiences." Next, we're joined by educators from the Charlestown Nursery School who share their innovative approaches to environment. Stephanie O'Hara is a classroom teacher who's been teaching for over 15 years. A graduate from Emerson College, she has a master's degree in communication disorders. As a speech and language pathologist, she has experience working with children and adults in rehabilitation facilities, hospitals, outpatient clinics, and early intervention programs. She brings a particular interest and expertise in language and literacy development, as well as extensive experiences in the study and practice of Reggio-inspired pedagogy. She is joined by Kelly Pellegrini, the director of Charlestown Nursery School. Kelly brings more than 20 years of experience in early childhood education. In addition to a BA from Bates College, Kelly holds master's degrees from Smith College and Lesley University in curriculum and teaching and bilingual early childhood education, respectively. Currently, she is part of the first cohort of early childhood leaders in the Saul Zantz Early Education Initiative at Harvard. She has worked as a teacher, administrator, and curriculum coordinator at the St. Francis School in Costa Rica, public schools in Amherst and Boston, Massachusetts, and at the Smith College Lab School. She has served on the Mayor Advisory Committee for 0 to 5 school readiness and has been active in creating early childhood programs throughout the area. She recently received an Unsung Heroine Award for her extensive civic involvement. In addition to her work at CNS, she serves as an advisor to many schools, as well as mentor, instructor, and advocate in early childhood. She writes, speaks, and consults on early childhood research, and she was the lead organizer for the Wonder of Learning in Boston. And we will close our evening with Megan Fennessy, who will focus on children and families, exploring the shape of family advocacy during a time of COVID. Megan has worked within special education for over 15 years as a special education teacher and as a BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. A graduate of UMass Boston and Fitchburg State, Megan has her MED in intensive special education pre-K to 22. Megan has lived and worked her entire career in and around the South Shore of Boston. She currently works as the district-wide behaviorist BCBA for Rockland Public Schools. Recently, Megan has begun to take her knowledge into higher education and accepted a role as an adjunct professor through Lesley University Graduate School of Education, teaching courses in strategies for inclusive environments. Megan provides insight into this remote learning presentation topic as a special educator and as a mother of a son on an IEP and a daughter on a 504 plan. And I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for being here. You have such a wealth of information that's joining us tonight. I'm so excited to hear what you all have to say. I just wanted to let everyone know I will be stepping out and Stephanie Spadorcia will be stepping in to sort of lead the rest of the evening. I have a 3-week-old at home and things get a little dicey in the evening, so please forgive me. I will be turning off my video, but we'll still be here. And now without Marianne, did you?
Dana, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the introduction. Just so that we make sure that our bandwidth stays happy, I would like just to request everyone turn off their video except for the speaker.
Thanks, Marianne. Sorry about that. And we are going to welcome Dr. Ann Densmore as our first speaker of the evening. Welcome, Ann, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to be a part of this group. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. I just want to honor you and tell you I'm in admiration of you as a group, because working with children for years, like I have, has been a real challenge, but during a pandemic has been a whole new experience. It's really harder, I think. I have to absolutely organize every little plastic bin with my goals and my materials and even if it's sticks and rocks, I have to think. And I have to say, I've really been challenged during the pandemic. So here we go. I'm going to give you 3 parts. A little bit about sharing ideas during COVID and how you treat children outdoors, which is my favorite space. And then the second part is about the classroom, and the third part is about Zoom. And it's all a real challenge. So here we go. When children go outside, I can send it to Dana and we can give you a copy of it. This is my new therapy dog, Sari. She is learning to come to speech with me. She hasn't gotten there yet. With lots of cookies, she will. And
actions button, there is a raise hand, and that will then help me because there's several pages here of people. So if you have a question or comment you'd like to make to add on, please use the raise hand feature.
Ellie, there's a question.
Emerald, yeah, Emerald. I hope I'm saying your name right.
Yes, you are. My only question is if we're teaching within the urban community, what suggestion would you have if we cannot really go outdoors due to safety for
That's
children?
really good. That's a really good question. It's really important. I think when you are somewhat, shall we say, corralled indoors, you want to try to bring the outdoors inside as best you can. You can get a bucket of sticks or rocks, or you can bring in sensory materials, or you can use shaving cream or whipped cream, or I'm sure all of the OTs in the world have lots of ideas about this, but sometimes you just can't go outside. Sometimes in New England, it's just too miserable, and you have to create ways of being indoors. And I'm happy to maybe talk with you longer and later about some of the ideas that I know work. The thing is, you have to continue to have some structure. Even though I'm play-based and I follow the child's lead, you still have to have a plan inside, and you have to have a time when you can have the child play and a time when they do some work on maybe language or math, and then you have time where you have play again. I mean, you have to structure things inside. Outside, they can be more free because they're free to go anywhere. But you still have to be careful. You can't just let them, for example, there's a street right there. I couldn't let these kids run anywhere. They'd be running into the street. So you have to take all the same precautions that you do outside too. I don't know if that helps.
Yes, it does a little bit. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you for the suggestions in the chat. People talk about bringing things inside and so forth, and that's really helpful. And I think I know COVID really restricts things, but thinking about how to use your school building, right? Like take a
Right.
field trip around your building and so forth when you can't go outside for safety or
Right.
reasons. Yeah.
That's a really good idea, just to run outside and run back. But some children can't go outside at all, and I understand that.
Other questions for Anne? I recently saw a therapist that I work with. I'm not the speaker, but just that she actually, the parents sent a video of the child's around their yard and sent that in, and they used that as a way to spark some conversation and so forth. So as a way to bring the outdoors in when they couldn't actually leave. So
Another
again,
thing another idea that I use is photography. I use my iPhone a lot. If you have an iPhone, you take pictures of kids doing some activities, and they love to see themselves in the activity. So you can have a picture of them running around the outdoors, or you can have them doing some activity or building blocks or building a fort. And then you can show them the iPhone or show them the picture if you have an iPhone. Or sometimes you can put them on a big television or something. But photography is very helpful.
thank you. I really appreciate your time, Anne. And I know people might have some more questions at the end. I'll make sure to get some questions at the end. We're now going to turn to our next two panelists, Stephanie O'Hara and Kelly Pellegrini. Again, they're joining us from the Charlestown Nursery School. These panelists will speak particularly to the unique role of the environment and how environments meet the needs of diverse learners in this increased time of distance and challenge because of the pandemic. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Stephanie and Kelly. Stephanie or Kelly, make sure you unmute yourself.
There we go. Okay, excellent. So you can see our screen, we hope. And we were just going to take you to Charlestown Nursery School before we begin our presentation. So just a couple of minutes to see some of the work that we're doing right now, this fall and this winter.
with a microscope? Orange dots. Really see it so. Oh, and just like your box, this building has a big cantilever. It's like a block that has nothing underneath it. Does it make that block steady?
Great. So I'll stop there and I'm going to go ahead and share. Ah, got it? Here we go. Let's see if I can share that. Perfect. Can you now see this new slide?
Yes.
There we go. So we gave you a sort of a sneak peek to get you back into the classroom with us with the video, but we wanted to introduce ourselves. As Dana mentioned, I'm Kelly Pellegrini and I co-direct with Katie Audette. Stephanie O'Hara, who's also doing the presentation with us, is representing the work that she does with Bridget Nyhan. All of us co-direct and co-teach at Charlestown Nursery School. And as you can see, in addition to the remote learning that we did since March over Zoom and continue to do with children who are not in the classroom, we've also are now in person. And so are able to bring a lot of our learning, as Anne says, outside. A little bit about sort of our approach and our understanding is we are a school that believes all children are capable and that we understand that we represent and serve a diverse group of learners. Stephanie and I and most of the teachers at Charlestown Nursery School have backgrounds in special education and bilingual education. And I think one of the things that we appreciate that as a school that begins to serve children as young as 2, that oftentimes there are unique learning styles that we are just discovering alongside parents. So we really fundamentally believe that all preschool settings are integrated settings. All preschool settings have a range of diverse learners. And as a result, all schools have to be ready to serve children wherever they are. And so our combination of the Reggio Emilia approach and Montessori and other best practices are designed to serve children of all different types of learning styles. In our classrooms now, we have at least half of the children are receiving some sort of supports or services or have some sort of diagnosis. Many of them receive early intervention, many receive speech and language. We have children with a range of different developmental delays and needs and supports that we're able to support within the classroom. One of the ways that we think about our practice is really through partnerships. So we have elected that before anything else, above and beyond our highly trained teachers and the co-teaching models our teachers spend an hour of research and development for every hour that they teach. And a lot of that is preparing them to serve children with a range of different learning styles. But it's also incredibly important to us that we have speech and language therapists on site, as you'll hear from Stephanie. She's a trained speech and language therapist, but we also have 2 other speech and language therapists in the school, as well as occupational therapists. So we've really made that a priority. In addition, we have relationships with behavioral supports. And through COVID, they have been able to come and observe in the classroom and provide services on site, which has been extremely helpful for children who pre-COVID were getting services in the classroom. And then during COVID, a lot of the services locally have been over Zoom. And that is one of the nice opportunities, but we like to also pair that with the work in the classrooms. it's very, very important to us that these specialists are informing our everyday teaching and learning and practice so that we can really make sure we have strong relationships and strong understanding of how we can transfer skills that children are working on with specialists into the classrooms. We also have a very, very robust screening process. And again, with so many children who had not been in school since over COVID, it was particularly important to us that we get back into school and that we give these same opportunities to children who might have missed an opportunity to get screened in the spring. So we had many of our children were screened before they arrived in the summer and then throughout the fall. We have an incoming class for next fall, and their screening process began in January, even though they will be arriving in September. And what that means is that about a third of them are already able to get some services that they might not have gotten without that screening process. Oftentimes the screening leads to full evaluations, and I think that has also been one of the many opportunities of being back together and in person during COVID, is because we've been able to refer children for full evaluations or services as they've needed them. And then that has allowed us to support more individual plans and more unique goals for each of the children that we serve. So that's sort of the overarching context for how we set the stage. And then maybe Stephanie can talk a little bit about what happens then in the classroom.
Just to give you a little context, the video that Kelly shared earlier was our older preschool children who were at a nearby park. For my classroom, who are 2 and 3-year-olds, we actually use a space that's adjacent to our buildings, which is very convenient for bathroom breaks. And especially during this colder weather time, you might imagine that we might need to pop inside and do some quick warm-up breaks. But we're so glad that we're outside, and we're really finding that all of our children, whether they're diverse learning profiles or any of the other children in the classes, everyone is really benefiting from being outside. And I think Anne really shared that very well before, with nature really is such a great teacher and a place to be. So we're able to use our space really well outside, and that we've found that we can, because of the length and the way it's situated, we're able to divide it with some dividing barriers that are pretty low. You can see over them and through them, but it does give us the opportunity to kind of move children around a little bit, to if someone's having some sensory issues and they might be a little overloaded by too much that's happening in that space, then we can maybe have them and another child or another teacher go to another area of the outdoor classroom where they can maybe do some calming strategies with sand. They might be able to move some heavy objects and get that lifting kind of input that their bodies might need. And it's really great to be out there, that we can have some gross motor breaks. We have lots of children who are super active, and they may be able to do some activities for a few minutes, but might need to take a break and go try the climbing wall or do some other gross motor activities before they're ready to kind of be regulated again and come back to an activity that we had planned for the day. As you can see from some of the video that we shared, our children are wearing masks. Even the very youngest, who came in at 2 years old, within 2 weeks, he was wearing a mask. So for the most part, it's been pretty successful. I think parents were super surprised that children that age can wear masks. We do have a couple children with sensory issues that have a harder time wearing a mask. So we do enforce social distancing as much as possible. Or like I said before, maybe moving some people around with some gentle redirection. And that's where having a third teacher in our classroom has been really helpful. So because of the COVID restrictions this year, we have had a few less children in our class because of square footage and kind of the regulations. So we have 7 to 8 children in our class, but we have 3 teachers. And that we found has really been instrumental in helping provide what every child needs. You know, some children need a little more one-on-one, a little more hand over hand. So it's great to have that third person available. Another thing that Anne also touched on in her presentation was having individualized kits. So to try to provide everyone with a very clean and contained experiences, we've drawn on a lot of our Montessori influences, and we use a lot of what we call kits, or it could be trays or little boxes that we'll put the child's picture on, and they'll have, depending on what we're doing for that day, it could be Play-Doh, it could be sensory things, and having those available and being very intentional about how we're doing that is just another way that we're making sure that everybody's safe and clean at school. So another thing that we do, and have always done at our school, but where we find that all the children can benefit from, is using a lot of visual supports in our work. So one way we do that is we take many pictures all day long. And so, for instance, in this picture, there's a child doing some work with painting and ice. So we might take pictures that we had done that day, and then the next day we're going to put those out with another invitation or provocation with materials, so that children can see themselves, they can see their friends in the pictures, and that will help them really recall and remember information and build their knowledge of materials as we go along. We also use a lot of pictures just in our setup of these experiences, so children know where to go and know, if I go to this table and there's a tray, my picture's on it, those are my materials, and that's what I'm going to use that day. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Another way we use visuals too is just to help children understand the sequence of a lot of our routines at school. So we'll have pictures of, how do I wash my hands, or how do I put away my snack when I'm done? And those pictures, typically we would have them posted in the classroom, and this year they might be out, in a plastic sleeve on a table, or we'll send them home, so that parents can also really reinforce those concepts with their children at home, and understand that these children are very capable. They can do a lot of things, and they might just need a little help with, the visual support.
And also, yes, I was just going to say, and also through the video, you notice sort of the range of provocations that sort of support different types of learners.
And we have found that we are, at first it was a little daunting to think, wow, how are we going to do this outside? And it seemed there was like, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. They shouldn't be sharing these materials. But we've really found that we have been able to do everything outside. We've been able to do painting. We've been able to do slime and Play-Doh and all of those things. And we're just happy that that we figured it out. So I think Anne also said that too, is nature in itself is such a great teacher. And so even though we're setting up these invitations and things to do, a lot of times what's really interesting for these children is the birds that are in the trees next door, or the squirrel that comes and visits us and tries to get their snack, or things like that. I think just another thing that's very, very important to us, and Kelly already touched on this too, is our partnership with parents. So part of what we're doing too is making sure that we're in contact with them very regularly, very consistently. We're having phone calls, we're sending emails, we're offering Zoom appointments if they like to do that. And at the end of our days, we always send home some pictures and some narrative of what we have done that day. Sometimes it could be what the group did, and it might be also include pictures of the other children in the class. or it might be just for their child. And this is what we did today. And if you'd like to extend that, here are a couple ideas of what you might want to try at home. And because we know that the parents spend much more time with them than we do. They know their children really well, and we want to make sure that they also know that we value them highly in this, this effort that we're all doing together.
Next. Oops, sorry, Stephanie.
So Kelly, I was going to let you.
Perfect, great. So, I mean, I guess to Stephanie's point, we said this sort of in the last slide, is that we have really found that even in COVID, best practice will guide us, and sort of a commitment to what we think children deserve and the experiences that we find critically important. And that's important to all our children, but particularly children who show some neurodiversity or need additional supports. That critical window from 0 to 5 is so important. And as we set out to reopen this year, we wanted to make sure that these children would get the experiences that other children had had before them. We often say they only get that first preschool experience once. And so they're not going to have a do-over next year. And this is their moment. And we want to make sure that we're capitalizing on every aspect of that. And so all of the skills and all of the strategies and all of the teaching methodology that we draw on, from mindful teaching to observation to integrating services, has been important at this time. And we've just had to be a little bit more creative. But clearly, we draw a lot from the inspiration of the schools in Reggio Emilia that remind us the importance of children with special rights and how to offer a range of experiences so that access points are open. We have also increasingly been influenced by Montessori and sort of that history of educators who really understand serving children with special needs and special rights, and with diverse learning styles. We have been working with Lisa Q and Iris at a sort of complementary curriculum. We've been thinking a lot about still the need to play, and in language, and the social pragmatic, and the sensory experiences, and all of the things that children need, many of whom for many months were alone and at home, and may or may not have had siblings or neighbors that they were interacting with. So we've really had to reintroduce them to a lot of our approach to learning and play. We find, as Stephanie said, that this all supports the ideas of universal design. Sorry, I've given myself a timer. That children, what's good for children with special rights is good for all children. And so it's been a really positive experience, and we're delighted to take your questions and respond in any way.
Thank you, Stephanie and Kelly. All the pictures and video was wonderful. So again, if you have any questions, if you would use the reaction button, the raise hand, I'll make sure to get people, and maybe Kelly, and maybe stop sharing your screen too. That'll people can. Do people have any questions for Stephanie and Kelly? I see Gerlind. Am I saying your name right?
Actually, my name is Barb. Gerlinda couldn't make it here today.
Oh, okay.
I have a question about your screening process. So do you start in the summer and then just continue through the fall? And what does that look like, kind of?
So our admissions is first come, first serve. So there's no screening as part of the admissions process.
Okay.
It's all by application. And so we never know the pool of learners that we might have.
Mhm.
But after they've accepted a spot, we offer them a range of supports and services. So the group that's coming this fall, we're offered the chance to meet with our speech and language therapist, and she does a screening initially. And then later there's opportunities at play dates for occupational therapists to do some observations. And if they determine then that it's important to do a full evaluation, they might do that. Many of the students that we have may have already been getting services, but over Zoom, and have been eager to get some support in person. So
Okay, good. Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions for Stephanie and Kelly? Thank you again. If something comes up, it's not your only chance. We'll have some open discussion and time for questions at the end. We're going to move to our final panelist, Megan. Again, Megan Fennessy is a district-wide behaviorist, BCBA for Rockland Public Schools, and an adjunct faculty member here at Lesley. And she is going to share how focus on advocacy for children and families and ways of supporting families and accessing services and creating practices and routines at home during this time of remote learning. So thank you, Megan.
Thank you. So thank you for having me today. I'm looking forward to this talk. I think that many of us here may be educators, but many of us are also parents. So many of us are both. So I think it's important throughout my slides here that we can kind of use the term educators and parents interchangeably, because we're all going through this new normal, that dreaded term, together. I think that this new pandemic and the new way of education has definitely shifted a lot of us. And we use the phrase very often that we're building the plane as we're flying it. So this visual here just kind of has a diagram of showing the parents and caregivers, educators and students, and how we overlap. But what I think is important is that this overlap of all three of us has so grown over the past couple months. We are working together more with Zoom and other online platforms. We're kind of in each other's environments so much more. This Henry Ford quote is something that I love. It's coming together is a beginning, keeping together is a process, and working together is success. I'm sure many people have seen, I know social media gets flooded with all sorts of different how-tos, and all the articles and the links can be overwhelming. But I think it's very important as educators and as parents that we think about managing ourselves and our stress. If we are not our best self, we are not our best teacher, best manager, best boss, best speech and language person. We have to think about what we can do to help ourselves. You cannot pour from an empty glass. Therefore, it's important to recognize and acknowledge that our own self-care is vital. Same for parents. We cannot be our best selves if we don't take some time for ourselves. I think one of the biggest things that I've worked with so many, whether in my role in the district or whether in my role in homes, is we have to give ourselves a break. This has not been easy on any of us. There is no one plan or one script that works for all families or all classrooms or all programs. Negative emotions are going to happen, and there is a space and a place for those negative emotions, and it is very important that we recognize that. And a phrase that has become all too common, and I just wish more people could embrace it is okay to not be okay. I myself have had moments as the parent trying to manage 3 children who are doing a hybrid at home learning model. I've cried. I have sent pictures to my coworkers and my friends of me crying at night, and it is okay. It gives me time to kind of pull it in, reflect on what's going on, and try to make it better. But I'm not going to beat myself up over the fact that I have shed many a tears, both as the educator and as the parent, over this past year. I think another tool to keep in the back of your kind of toolbox is limiting your screen time. If you are already feeling at a level of stress or a level of anxiety, sometimes social media cannot be our friend. Sometimes looking through those different, whether it's Instagram or maybe TikTok, might not be the best thing that we want to see in that moment, in that day, because it can heighten those already feelings of anxiety and stress. Remembering to do something for you, whether it's just taking a walk with your pet, sitting in your bathroom and hiding from your children, that is okay too. I know I have been there. Or it's maybe having a virtual date with friends. I know myself, I have a Zoom tomorrow night with my high school friends, and that's something once a month we're trying to do as we're not able to get together. We do it now via Zoom. I think it's important to keep that connection. You need to lean in and lean on those people that you need. Make connections, whether it's, again, through past friends, community, neighbors, educators. Find those people that you need to talk to and set up those times, whether it's a distance walk or the virtual kind of platform. I think it's important to have those people-to-people connections in this time where we're trying to stay away from everybody. Another big thing, and this is pre-pandemic and will be post-pandemic for me as a behavior specialist, is really focusing on reasonable and achievable goals. I think it is all too common that we hear people set like a New Year's resolution, and the reason so many of them fail is because you set something that's too lofty, it's too huge. So I tell families that are working through this new, well, not so new anymore, right? We've been here for a year doing this virtual sort of new schooling for our children. It is important to set small goals. It is much more likely that you will feel success if you break down larger goals into small, more manageable chunks and kind of attack a plan from there. As many of you with young children probably know, and may have heard it, but I cannot speak enough, again, before pandemic, after pandemic, during pandemic, routines and schedules are necessary. Creating a plan and sticking to it is not always easy, but it is definitely vital and important in a home with young children, older children, children with disabilities or not. It is a very, very important part of having a successful, home time. I use a lot of visuals in my own family. From some of my older children, I can just write lists, piece of Post-it note, or maybe an actual agenda that's just like a calendar, or using their apps in their iPhones. For my younger son, we still use more visuals because he's a first grader and he doesn't read at that level really yet. So we use a lot of pictures. I will share my Google slide presentation in the chat box at the end, because some of these links are really great for learning how to make some of these schedules. As you see here in the bottom left, it's just a regular old agenda. That's what I use for my middle schoolers. But my son in first grade, we still break things down sometimes in a first then contingency, or on the far right here, it's more of a daily schedule. This is one I actually have in my house to use with him to kind of set up his home learning days. I think this would be a model of rules and expectations for, this is Google Meet. Some districts obviously have chosen different platforms. This is for an older level child that would be expected to be able to read, but it's quite clear what the rules are and what's expected when they are home and they are accessing their education via the computer. For younger children, I'm a huge fan of the pictures with the written word on it as well. Rules and expectations need to be clear and consistent and posted for all to see. Something like this could be used as a poster, but I've also seen teachers take little individual cards, even put them onto popsicle sticks so they can hold it up. Even as a parent, if we can point to a visual, it is less distracting for our child when they're trying to learn via the platform of the internet. When we have to speak to them, we may interrupt and then they may not hear what their teacher was saying. But if we can point to or touch something, it's a less invasive way to get their attention and cue them back to what their expected behavior is at that time. This is another really important, again, before and after. This is something I speak a lot when I go into homes to do behavior consultation. What should not be heard by little ears should not be spoken by big mouths. It's really hard to sometimes have conversations without your little ones around, but I really try to I really try to express this to educators and parents alike. Watch what you're saying around young children. We are hearing a lot now. The political topics have definitely decreased. However, it's still out there. We want to be careful that our young children are not hearing things that they don't understand. Their brains do not comprehend a lot of the big world things that are happening around us. So being mindful of what our children are being exposed to is so vitally important. Watch out for programs just like the news or social media, chatty friends. There is misinformation everywhere. It's important for us, I use that symbol KISS, keep it simple sailor, or keep it simple silly, to keep facts brief. Reassure children at any age at all times that they are safe. That is a primary focus that we as educators and parents need to worry about when we're working with young children or older children or any children, right? So make sure that you explain to them the measures that we're using. For what's going on now, it's the social distancing, it's wearing our masks, it's washing our hands, it's not touching other people's toys. Validate their feelings, just like us adults. It is definitely okay for children to have moments where they are frustrated. We want to validate that frustration is okay. It's not inappropriate or not bad for them to have those sorts of emotions. So we want to validate and comfort and support them through everything that's going on. A phrase like, I hear that you're scared and it's okay to be scared. Let's talk about what we can do when we feel that way. Creating what we often refer to as a toolbox of tools or coping skills that you can help your child or your student when they are having those negative emotions is very, very important. If you've worked at all with anyone in the behavior field, this is definitely something that you have heard before, I can assure you. Positive reinforcement. Children at all levels need a lot of positive attention, whether it's a high five, a thumbs up, a way to go. When children get older, I know myself, I had to kind of shift what I was doing with my daughter, for example, who's 13 years old. I now sometimes I send her a text that's maybe just the kiss emoji or and I love you or you're gonna slay the day, those sorts of things, just to kind of help be age appropriate and to keep that positive momentum going for them. I often, if I am at work, I try to check in via things like FaceTime or try to do phone calls to check in with my children when I'm not with them at home for their home learning days. You've heard, if you're in education again, or a parent who's had any sort of behavior help at home, a contract, a checklist, a token board. Those are all different ways for us to reinforce positive behaviors. As I said, or as it was said by Dana in my little intro, my son who's on an IEP struggles greatly with all sorts of executive functioning skills. So he is on a reinforcement schedule now for keeping certain things organized. For example, his school binder. I sit with him weekly. We make sure that all the parts are together, but he gets rewarded. And that money, I use this app called Greenlight. It's basically does the work for me. He has certain chores and he earns a certain amount of money for each thing that he does, and it gets deposited into his debit card every Sunday. You can make it small as 50 cents for the chore or as much as $5 if you wanted to. For my younger son who's in first grade, we still go more the route of a token board. So something like earning stickers or smiley faces or check marks when he has completed the things that he's expected to complete in a day. And he is often earning for monies to go to the candy store in his menu, or sometimes he does earn bucks on his online gaming as well. Some general tips, parents and educators, it's very important to communicate that if you're having a really bad day, it's okay to admit that. I have had some sessions with children where you can just tell it's not going to go well. And having that conversation with the parent of like, maybe I can try to see you at this time if I can reschedule, or you know what, so-and-so's not having a really great day. This isn't going to work for us. And that is a definite okay thing to do. Because sometimes when we're doing our virtual, if we're already starting and we can tell the child, for example, is hiding under the table, crying, maybe hiding under a blanket, you can try to work with and try to get their attention via the screen. But if it's not going to work, I just like to let everyone know, have that communication between the teacher, the therapist in the home, because sometimes we all need a break and that is okay. Working together as a team, teachers, therapists, and parents, we all need to be communicating with each other to talk about what is working or what isn't working, and maybe looking at how we're presenting something or what time of day we're meeting with the child. And sometimes things may have to be tweaked to make it better for all parts involved. And a funny quote that's kind of come up a lot in the past year for us too in education, the only part of our day that is predictable is that we have to be prepared for the unpredictable. There are, whether it's technological issues or whether all of a sudden the dog needs to go out or all of a sudden the glass of milk is spilt, there are a lot of things that can go bad in a virtual learning scenario. And we have to be flexible thinkers. Bubblegum brain, those are terms that we use where we have to understand that the unpredictable could totally and most likely happen on the regular for us. Another part, I think that for many families who are English language learners, the communication that is key for all successive children can be a little bit more difficult. And I know that I'm very blessed in the district that I work in. We have tutors and we have a wonderful woman on our behavior team who is also bilingual, but we have to use our staff in a flexible way, and we have to reach out and make sure that we're creating and maintaining successful relationships with all families. So whether that means we have to have maybe a private one-on-one session with a translator, making sure all of our documents that we're sending home have been translated into their native languages, or always having access to the EL sort of staff and tutors, we have to make sure that we're going above and beyond to maintain and create those relationships with all of our families and doing whatever we can to make that bond. Some resources that I think, again, the hyperlinks will be when I post them into the chat. Child Mind Institute has a great ton of resources for families. PBIS is kind of my jam. It's one of my favorite sites. There's a wonderful doc on the site about supporting families and great tools for families to use during this virtual schooling. Obviously another PBIS, and I also included both my Lesley and my Rockland Schools email. If there are any questions after this presentation tonight and anybody would like to reach out, I am here for questions. And I
Thank you, Megan.
All right.
So are there any questions right now specific for Megan's presentation?
Oh, all right.
Thank you. I know that people will appreciate getting the resources and so forth. And there was a question earlier about getting Anne's presentation where she had resources. So we'll make sure Marianne Adams is my partner in crime here. So we'll make sure that those get there. So I want to open it up to any general questions to any of our presenters. And then we have a few questions we'd like to ask our panelists to speak freely. But I first want to make sure there's no specific questions from any of our participants. So my big question is one I'm often asking the student teachers I work with here at Lesley to our presenters, so we can start in any order. What is one tool that you have learned to use or strategy you've learned to use because of COVID that you're going to continue when life goes back to quote unquote normal? Is there something you've learned that you want to continue to use? Anybody want to take that? Megan?
Yeah, I think that being a behavior specialist and working with parents here and there was great before, but I think tools like Zoom have made it easier for me to connect with families. So also more in vivo, in the moment. I have had some families where they're dealing with a behavior, and since they're able to get me, more readily available. Like I couldn't always drive and get there quickly, but now they can call or Snapchat, or not Snapchat, what do you call it? FaceTime, and I can see what's happening in the moment and I can respond to it then. And that's been helpful with some of the families that I've worked with. And I'm going to keep using that as an option.
Stephanie or Kelly or Anne?
Stephanie, sure.
Stephanie?
It's not a tool, but what I would say I would continue to go forward with is doing more outside time. I think in the past we would that would always be like the last thing we would think of. Oh, we're going to get all these things done in the classroom, and these are the important things. But we found that we can do anything outside. So why wouldn't we spend more time where that's where children are so happy, they show so much joy, many of them are so much more regulated outside that I could see us spending more time out there than we ever had before.
Yeah, and I would just further that. I mean, I think we are by far better teachers. I think, as Megan said, our relationships with parents are much stronger. We're communicating with them much more. We're much more accessible. We're sending play and learn plans home every single day for families to extend. We're sort of really appreciating that they are going to need some support as well. Outside learning, I think we're being more strategic and intentional about the choices that we're making. We really had to think, like, what are the most important things for children right now? If you could only, what were we not going to sacrifice, and what did they deserve? And it really encouraged us, and we've always been building and rebuilding, but this was a real call to sort of rethink everything that we've done. And I think in many ways we are a better school than we've ever been.
Anne, do you want to? Oh, you're on mute, Anne.
Oh, here I'm talking to myself. Okay, so I have learned more about including the parent in the therapy sessions, and they love it. They like it if they have the time, either the dad or the mom or a sibling. And I've also really learned a lot about including siblings and families in the whole process. And, teaching speech and language is sometimes very difficult, but basically it can be learned. And so you can teach parents this whole process, and they're proud of themselves. And plus, when they work with me even once a week, then they take it all with them and they practice with the kids. And then the child gets it more than once a week. The child gets it 5 days a week. So that's, I think, been my emphasis with COVID more than anything, is that I want the child to really get everything they can for the whole week. And before, I was thinking, oh, he gets it twice a week, he'll be fine. Well, in speech, it's really helpful to have the parents helping too. So I worked on that more. That's what I learned.
It is, and I just say again, it's so interesting. In March, it sort of all happened all of a sudden. And I think we do know that our time is very precious, and we've always appreciated that. But there's been this feeling all year, is like, maybe we won't be here next week, or maybe something will happen. And I think that has called on all of us to really make the most of each moment.
Good point. So some questions came up on the chat. Oh, go ahead, Anne.
I was going to add one thing, Stephanie, about the outdoors. If you want to see something really fun, Google Finnish. What is it? It's a better day. I think it's a Denmark. Anyway, Google the forest kindergarten of Denmark and Finland, and you'll see these little toddlers climbing up these mud hills. I mean, they're covered in mud. Or you'll see little kids climbing trees. I don't know if I'd be up for kids taking the risks that they take, but it's really fun to look at for outside play. I mean, we can't exactly do it that way, but a lot of it we can. So it's an interesting philosophy.
We think of the Germans often because as it's gotten colder, we would like to have the children making a fire, but that does not follow urban regulations. But Anji played too in China. I mean, I think, for us, we're in the city. So someone asked about the city. So I would just say quickly is that, we knew everybody in Lincoln was going to do this, and in Concord and lots of lovely places. But we really are in urban parks. We're next to a courthouse. There are sometimes people who spend the night in a park, and children have been incredible. They've sort of said, someone's sleeping over here, and I think their sense of community is really profound. The city of Boston has been very kind to us. We asked if it would be okay. We thought it would just be for a couple of weeks. And January came, and we were still out there every day with our wagons. But I think, to Anne's point, it's a lesson that it can happen on mud hills or in trees or in sidewalks or anywhere. And we hope that inspires all of us.
Yeah.
There's two questions in the chat that relate to that, particularly at Charlestown, right? How have you been able to use the local playground? Our participant here thought you couldn't use with regulations. They go on walks, but they've avoided parks. So how have you dealt with that tension with COVID?
Yeah, so we did too, and that's what led us to sort of these malls or spaces. I think you'll see in the video that it is a plaza, very Reggio inspired, and then City Square Park is also does not have any climbing equipment or any of those things. And we've brought all of our own materials, all the blocks, all of the things have come with us outside. In Stephanie's outdoor classroom, it is a space that we have. But like never before, they have taken the toddlers on much longer walks, and their stamina is incredible. I think for children who probably most places take their strollers, sometimes we'll turn around and we look at the Zakim Bridge and say, oh my gosh, there are the toddlers. How did they get here and how will they ever get back in time for pickup? But maybe Stephanie could speak to some of the other places that they've gone.
I think that we've been to Monument, the Bunker Hill Monument Park area, which again, it's just a lot of open space. We've found just little pockets of trees and natural places that are just on a little corner of our neighborhood, and use those and return to them many, many times. And children are remembering and recalling every time that we go there, like, oh, wait, can we go back and check that? Because remember last time we were there, we did this, this, and this. And so, you know, we're really able to travel far distances and make the most of our time, even with just some sticks and pine cones that are very memorable. And when we write about those things to the parents, those are the things that we find that they are enjoying some of the most. That those are the things that get forwarded to the grandparents and the friends, and look at what we're able to do with just, you know, some rocks and things that we just happen to find.
No, it's true. I often work in parks and sometimes just little places of green in Cambridge or any area, and you just try to seek it out and find it. And the kids will respond. It's amazing.
So one of the questions was relation to the effort of packing up the wagons full of things when you go to these outside your school community, and how do you deal with that? Like packing up wagons of blocks or other materials you want to bring for this supporting outside play.
Yeah, and we seem to keep ordering more wagons, but yeah, I mean, I think we always set the stage, and so the environment as third teacher is really important to our work. So teachers always would be in an hour before setting up provocations, and now they're just doing that staging in these public spaces. I think that someone also asked, like, what do we do when people come? And usually there's spaces where there are not a lot of people, and we found corners that were not terribly occupied. But it's also really made learning visible in a way to anybody who's walking by, or we have neighbors who are constantly seeing us out there. And I think their view of what children can do and their view of what's developmentally appropriate, and you know, children who have seemed really dysregulated in classrooms seem much more regulated outside. So I think it's changed their whole trajectory in many ways and how they've been able to perform. But packing up the wagons has seemed similar to setting the stage in the classroom.
Another question that came up in the chat is if any of you could speak to how do you deal with supporting social skills when the realities of social distancing and having to wear a mask, for instance, they can't see facial expressions. How are you seeing that, and how are you addressing that?
Excuse me. Well, Kelly probably knows too. It's hard. I mean, you have to make yourself, I had to train myself not to go close to the kids. And, you know, I want to hug the toddlers. I mean, you know, I can't. And so you have to kind of set up rules before you set up a plan to get together to do something. And you have to inform them where they can go. I take a round thing of tape with me. If I go to a park, and I'll put a piece of tape down and say, okay, Stephanie's over there. Okay. You know, another person's over here, and I give them space with pieces of tape, you know, architectural tape. And then we play a game or we have something, but we can talk to each other. I mean, 6 feet isn't that far. And we do social skills all the time with different games. I mean, the other day we were practicing a friendly voice. Sometimes the kids go up to each other's face and yell. I'm always talking about speaker listener distance. So we did that with the tapes, and we practiced being too far away, and your voice had to be a little louder, and just simple little speech skills like that. You can do a lot with social skills outside. And, you know, you have to think about it. And I had to train myself. I'm just used to gathering up the clan, you know, and this just doesn't work now. So it's different. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy with the tape having, right? We all learned as teachers long ago the things that we should probably invest in, right? Like Velcro and duct tape and those
No.
kind of things. So yeah. Megan or Stephanie or Kelly, do you want to answer that question? How are you dealing with the social distancing and masking and so forth?
Yeah, I think just from my, my scope being a behaviorist, and I do go out to recess often with children, I think we've kind of started to use games that we hadn't used before. So like hopscotch was one that had been kind of forgotten, but every child can hold their own pebble and throw it, so they're not sharing. We can have lines. Obviously things like Foursquare where you're holding the ball and we can't do that. I think games like bingo or tic-tac-toe where they can have a piece and do a part, but they're not sharing and interacting with the same pieces has been helpful. And then as far as the mask wearing, I've been doing a lot of direct service working on children, looking at eyes and what our eyes do. Now, when you're outside, that gets so much harder. And I realized when the weather got cold, because the hats come down to here and the masks are to here. So that became quite challenging. But I take those moments to do a little bit of like the stop and think, like, okay, so-and-so fell, let's stop and think. What do you think is happening? Well, I think they could be crying, but they'll say it. I can't see their face. I'm like, yep, you're right. We can't. So it has been very challenging, at least with the students I work with. I have found that probably the most challenging is addressing their speech and language, social skills goals during this time, because we used to do a lot of, okay, you get attention by tap the child on the shoulder, wait a few seconds, but we can't encourage any of that right now.
I mean, they do have clear masks you can use, that are clear. Except they fog up. They fog. So
I found in scuba diver gear, they make a defogger and it works wonders on. I have clear masks and the defogger helps it from fogging.
Oh, wow.
Found it on Amazon. Lovely Amazon.
Okay.
But I think, as educators who care about serving diverse learners, it has been a great challenge and opportunity. The children have been had much more ease than we thought. We thought it was going to be much more cumbersome, but it's really relied on all of us, one, as you say, to be more explicit and sort of pull into that toolbox of some of the tools of the mind games, some of the things that we had not done for a while, all of that flexible thinking and thinking about whole body expression. And many of those strategies have proved incredibly important in sort of our own toolbox. And then I think people are social beings. And so it's been amazing to see how resilient children have been about forming relationships. The two classes are quite a distance away, and they had wanted to create a message machine to communicate with each other. And so I think it's made us think about, like, what are other ways that we connect with people? What are other ways that we communicate, and draw on those? Would you say that, Stephanie, and other sorts of?
Yeah, I think one thing that's been really successful with the young toddlers is we have snack still at our program, and we do it outside. So they have their masks off for that brief amount of time, but that is a chance for them to really see each other's faces. And they've started making up their own games where they'll, we often talk about, oh, what do you have for snack? And is that, does so-and-so also have strawberries? And who has something orange? And who has something green? Or who has something crunchy? But now they're making up their own games where they're taking their snack and they're hiding it behind their back. Guess what I have behind my back? And then other children will guess. And then eventually almost every single child has played that game and hidden something behind their back for us to guess. And it gives us a chance for them to be silly too. And some of the teachers will say, I don't know, maybe you've got spaghetti and meatballs behind your back today. And so it's fun just to see them see their smiles and see them without their masks, because they do look so different when you can only see this much of them. But to see them making up their own games, I think we've seen just a lot more of them making up their own games in the spaces that we're in, and figuring it out.
Great ideas. We have another question that just came in. Someone asked about how do you teach when the students are in the remote world? How do you work with them on the social skills related to controlling their own impulse, to not speak over each other, how to struggle, kids that might struggle with social cues face to face might also struggle in the online environment, especially those that are so young. Anybody want to talk about that? What strategies do you use? Megan?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, Megan and then Kelly, sorry.
Okay. So I use, in my opinion, some things I use sometimes are social stories or social scripts to review with the child before the Zooms. Now, many of the students who I had seen struggling with this have kind of learned it over the course of the year, but up front, it took that explicit instruction of basically, when I'm on a Zoom, I need to do this, or having them practice muting and unmuting. There are ways as educators where you can mute students, but that can become tedious as the teacher to constantly have to remute if you're dealing with that in the classroom. Another thing obviously is positive reinforcement. I've helped some families set up for, every time the student appropriately engages within the class, they earn something. And then maybe at the end of the day or the end of the week, they're able to turn in their points for something that's reinforcing to them. Those visuals that I showed, I have made visuals for a lot of the teachers that I've worked with that were visuals that you could put on like a popsicle stick. So the teacher can hold up and it has like the line through the microphone. And another strategy is breakout rooms. I have had a lot of we use the word blurt. We kind of follow the social thinking. So a lot of my blurters, sometimes we have found that they're more successful going to a small group instead of being in the large class. So it's kind of a lot of dabbling in my answer there, but those are just some of kind of the strategies we've used over the past year.
Kelly, were you going to answer too?
Well, I would just say we, of course, were convinced we were not going to use Zoom, and in 48 hours realized that we needed to do something. And those connections, it proved to be much, much more positive than we thought it was going to be from March to June. And the relationships with children sustained themselves. But we did have to spend some time going back and watching Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers. And I date myself when I say Romper Room, if you can remember the end of Romper Room. But then we said, to teachers, you've got to go back. And I think it has been such a lesson to educators that I'm not sure that we've advanced with the technology and used kind of the strategies that we know. I mean, Sesame Street just celebrated 50 years, and I think there's some really interesting research on their reach and their connection with children. And so drawing on some of those skills, and I think Stephanie could speak.
Because it's more of a coaching thing for me, but the kids love it. And then you can, if the video turns out all right, you can show it to the child and you can teach with it. In other words, if you're trying to get more eye gaze shifts from a child that doesn't look up, maybe on the spectrum or something, and you have to work at that sometimes, as you know. Megan, you probably know about that. And so you work on, giving the child the object and having them look up and look at the object again, and you kind of work on that, and you take a little video of it, and then the parent shares it with me, and then we talk about it, and then the child gets to see it. So that's just something I found seems to do pretty well.
I would imagine just as a side note, it just occurred to me that example, Anne, that like parents are going to probably understand their children's therapy more now because they're partners in it in a way that they weren't before, right? It was often, here, you take them, I'm going to sit in the waiting room.
Exactly. No, they're really, and they help a lot. And, I think I can't quantify any of this, but I think the kids get better faster because they've got something every day and the parents know what I'm doing and they try to do it too. I really think they get better faster, at least some.
Might be an extra benefit of COVID that we didn't predict in the world. Shut down. Someone had a question, Kelly, for you. Are you offering at your school setting, are you offering a hybrid approach to learning, or are the children completely back in school?
anyone who wants to be completely back in school is back in school, but we do have families who elect to be remote, either have elected since the beginning of the year or at certain periods during surges or during certain vulnerabilities. So we have about 10 children who are remote all the time. And so each day, teachers send a play and learn plan with possibilities for home. And then there are 3 times a week, there are times to connect in whole group and small group and individually. And so there is that possibility. And again, that has been really successful for lots of families. And I think something that's just enriched our practice for children who then need to stay home for whatever reason, they can connect. And I think they have appreciated that. We've had some great music opportunities and other things. Our goal is to use the screen to get off the screen. So often we're giving an invitation for them to try something, and because of the documentation can sort of propel some emergent experiences through the technology. Someone also asked about when parents are reluctant, I noticed, about getting services or support. So I would just say that is very, very common for us. And I think we've really tried to normalize. And I think because we have so many children who are getting supports and services, and we've really talked about it's like having a personal trainer. If everyone could have Anne just talk to them all the time, and Megan just check in with me and tell me to get off my TikTok or whatever it might be. I mean, it's just such a powerful thing. And I think in the age of having personal coaches and personal trainers and
Right.
if only this is something I think we can really sort of capitalize on and destigmatize, but it's a process and it's a journey and it takes time. It is often, and Megan probably knows this better than any of us, it's often when people sort of hit their wall or the behavior becomes the problem. And I think when people realize that we can offer children tools that support them, of course, there we have children who come with Down syndrome or a spectrum diagnosis that they have well before they've arrived at us. But we also have lots of children who, for whatever reason, early intervention didn't notice anything, or the pediatrician kind of missed something, and they can sometimes be getting competing messages. And I think just making sure everybody is getting screening and everybody's engaged in the process, we usually get there. Not always in the first couple of months, but I am amazed at how quickly Stephanie and Bridget and the other toddler teachers in particular get people there, and what a difference that means if they are getting 3 years of support versus 1, and what a difference if they're getting it at 2 rather than waiting till 7 or 8.
Someone asked a question here about suggestions on how you handle hybrid. I'm assuming the question, Marie is one of our participants, how you handle hybrid in the at like the with the young children setting, and when some kids are on the computer and some kids are face to face.
So we have not, it's actually, it's a remote program, but it's not given by the teachers who are, when you're teaching, you're in-person teaching, and then there's another set of remote teachers. Classroom teachers might also check in with children later, but teachers are not juggling those 2 things at the same time. And in some of our preschool classes, a teacher might have a day that they're checking in with remote, so it's a non-teaching day.
Megan, do you want to talk about in your school setting how they're handling hybrid with any suggestions? I'm just trying to respond to this question in the chat.
Yeah, it was so weird. It wouldn't let me like unmute. I must be doing it wrong. I think the schedules and routines are really important. So understanding, if it's their school day, is it clear what their expectations are when they wake up? They wake up, they brush their teeth, they get their backpack, they go to the bus, versus what's their expectation when it's a hybrid day. You might still get up, get dressed, brush your teeth, but then you're on the computer. For my littlest one, we have a schedule, so he knows what that looks like. And he has his picture of Miss Broder, who's his first grade teacher, and he sees her picture. Then he knows he has a break, and then he knows he has either his science or social studies, and we have their names and icons. So he knows what his expectations are when he's in front of the screen. I think that that's helped him a lot. Doesn't help sometimes when all of a sudden you find out that the hybrid remote teacher is absent that day, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, you don't have 10 o'clock, social emotional learning today. But again, the best thing we can predict is that we have to be planning for the unpredictable. But I'm a big fan of schedules and routines. So they have some sort of way to understand what's expected of them when they're in their school days and what their expectations are in their home days.
So, my question is like, like when you're teaching, when you are in a school and you're teaching, you have student in front of you and you have student remotely. That was my question. I want to know that if you have any suggestion or you indulge that.
It's very difficult. I think in my particular district, it's different than the district that my children go to school in. So I'm kind of seeing it from both sides. I guess it would be very specific answers depending on what your hybrid model looks like. For my staff in the special education classrooms, they have found it better that the live streaming wasn't working. So they do more, a 30-minute check-in at this time and a 30-minute check-in of that time to do the direct instruction of the students that are at home, because doing it simultaneously didn't work. I know Stephanie and I both live in the same town, and our middle schoolers who were still in a hybrid model, they're now live streaming all day. So those teachers are teaching in front of their children in person and at the same time. And it is a lot, but I think a lot of questions that you may have, Marie, if that was you who I think was speaking, I'd be happy to talk with you separately, because it may be very specific what your hybrid model looks like and what supports I would recommend.
Thank you.
And that has definitely been, our alumni students, a lot of them are in the Boston Public Schools, and of course the high need students have gone back. And so children who are at home sometimes see their peers in class and have lots of questions about that and are trying to negotiate it. So
that's why I want to know.
They're wondering why are some children in school,
Yeah.
why not? And and I, as lovely as it has been to make learning visible, to see every sibling drop off all fall and watch some children get to go play and get to engage in blocks with peers and participate while I'm going back on a computer. I think we're going to all need a lot of language about how we explain this time and how we retell it as well. Because children are, as Megan said, they can hear us and they're watching us. And I think they're wondering about the decisions that we're all making.
Right. Emerald, you had a question again.
I have a question. So because the group of kids that I work with currently, they are in school all day, and then right after school is over, they go straight to after school. And most of the time they look exhausted, or they're working really hard to get their homework done, a quick snack. So how do you balance movement, or I don't know if I want to use mindfulness for the kids, and what would be the suggested time limit for them? Because they've just gone through, okay, I'm on Zoom all day for class, and then now I got to rush to after school, also virtually, or in person, either or as an option. So how would you be able to balance that for younger kids from pre-K to
Good
maybe?
question. Anyone want to talk? One of our presenters talk about a strategy for?
I love the way people have introduced the term brain breaks, and I run into kids in Boston and they'll say, I'm on a brain break, but I do wish they didn't call them brain breaks, because I think they're brain builders. And I think what we know in the research that every 20 minutes people have to move, and I think to find creative ways to sort of keep a timer, as I did in the presentation, and make sure that they're every 20 minutes getting to move, and to be really sensitive to that. I think children have to move for their brains to grow, and there's some great data on that. Certainly John Rady and some of the other people who've done some of that exercise science, we should all be thinking about. But as Anne says, a couple of minutes can be powerful.
Great point. I like that brain building, right? Because it does. I often say to even my own graduate students, your brain can only take in what your butt can endure, right?
Yeah.
In class. So we got to get up and move or do things or apply or play or do those kind of things. So maybe Murad, thinking about what is the transition when they first come into the aftercare. You know, what is that transition? And sometimes it's the new adult getting them and they're thinking about, okay, I got to get them to do the routine of aftercare, but maybe they need a transition before they can do the routine of aftercare. Mike,
Yes.
are you going to suggest something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I'm not sure what role you're in right now, but I know in our district, working with the after school program and the daycare and communicating, you know, if it's a particular student who you might be struggling with or feeling like they need more of a break, having that conversation and saying, hey, I know you only do a 10-minute snack, but when Johnny comes, he might need a little bit extra because he's holding it together all day at school and he needs a few extra minutes. Or you know, making sure that they're understanding what the threshold of that child may be if you feel like they might not have that. So maybe they're 15, 20 minutes at aftercare of work, and then they need a 10-minute break. Every 20 minutes on gives them a 10-minute break. But we've had great success with just communicating and working with our after-school program in our district.
Sounds good. So far, we've just been doing as the kids enter via Zoom, because everyone comes at different times. So we just been doing 5 to 10-minute breathing exercises, some stretching, shape yoga for 5 to 10 minutes before we start doing assignments for now.
Those are great. And I like more calming breaks than sometimes those, oh my goodness, who are the young men that sing Popsico, Popsico, and it gets them kind of riled up. So it's very good to be mindful of what exercises you're having them do that are creating more of a calming sensation than a riling them up.
Right, that's true.
Wouldn't that be a brilliant innovation? Like if this allowed us to be in dialogue, as Megan says, between school and after school, if we began to think more holistically about home and school and all of those things, there is a great opportunity, because I think like never before, we've seen how interconnected those things are and how vital this, you know, as Megan's slide showed at the beginning and Anne has talked about, we always believed in working, you know, thought we were working in partnership, but I think this is a true opportunity.
Right.
That's a great question. Other questions?
We also welcome advice. If there's things you think we should be reading or thinking about or doing better, we would love to hear about that. So please feel free to share or reach out to us if you have suggestions.
Yes. I love suggestions.
Hello, my name is Anaí. I would like to say for the teachers and CNS that it's really inspiring what you're doing outdoors. And I'm hoping that a lot of schools will take that approach. And I've also babysat for many of your students, and they love spending time outdoors, and it's really great for them. And it's also true that the parents feel a lot more involved in these crazy times.
Yes, that's true. I agree.
Thank you so much to our presenters. I know I learned a lot and thought about a lot of things. We really appreciate all the time that you gave and all of you who came virtually to Lesley University tonight. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Marianne. You're on mute. Right, we've said the word unprecedented this year, and so you're on mute, right? I've said those two things more this year than any other time in my life. Oh no, we can't hear you. Okay, I can close us out, Marianne, and if your audio, oh, here you go. Oh, wait, try it again. So I know, well, we're seeing if Mary Ann's technology is going to work. You will get a certificate in the mail. That'll come via email. We'll make sure if people wanted a copy of your resources in particular. And Megan already put a Google link in the chat. So make sure before you leave that you get the link there. Oh, and we have someone here from Bermuda. We should have done the session in Bermuda. Oh my goodness. So that's
That'd be nice.
yeah. So there's I love to see where people are coming from. So we really know it's a challenging time for everybody. We really want to thank everybody for how grateful and how we all as educators together, right? I think what's a key focus is kids at the center and engaging kids and learners. One of my mentors is on the call here, Martha McKenna, and just how all of you talk about engaging kids and families. And that's going to be the key to so much of our collective success as we move through this and learn some strategies, right? Like I think that like bringing in siblings and how to use Zoom to check in with parents and they feel connected to us even after life goes back to a more typical schedule become crucial, and build bridges and connections between all. Make sure you check out, I'm sure this is what Mary Ann's going to say, that we have lots of wonderful events coming up. There'll be another innovation series later this spring. Make sure to be looking for that. You'll get an email. The Center for Advanced Professional Studies is a great, check out Mary Ann's email where she has a link to upcoming events, which off the top of my head, I can't speak to them, but Mary Ann's technology is working. No, still not working. But thank you very much, everybody. So Mary Ann had a great closing and I'm not doing it justice. So thank you. Yep. Thank you, everybody. And there was one person I wanted to speak to, Megan, for a question. I'm going to make a breakout room for that. And thank you so much.
Thank you
Have a
for
good
having
evening,
us.
everybody.
Be safe. Wear your
Thank
mask.
you.
Yes, wear your mask. Be safe.
All
Thank
right.
you so much, Stephanie, Kelly, and
Thank
Ann.
you all.
And yeah, thanks, Shabash. is
Thank
here.
you. Lovely meeting all of you. Hope to
Lovely.
reconnect again soon.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Visit
And
us,
Stephanie.
visit us if you're in Charlestown. You know where to find us. We'll be in a
Yep.
public park.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful presentation. Thank you all.
That went very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
It
nice.
was wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
See you,
Oh,
Erica.
hey, Erica, how are you?
Hi, Shabbat. Marianne. Good to see everybody.
Yeah.
So someone had an individual question about a delicate topic that she wanted to ask Megan. She put it in a private chat. So I said I would do a breakout room. So
Smart.
so they're gonna chat it up.
That's great. Good.
You're still not